Everything you're about to hear is real history. It happened on American soil. It shaped the nation you see today. But most people never learn it. Not because it isn't important, but because it's uncomfortable. This is the hidden history of America they never taught you. When people think about American history, they're usually told a simple story. A story about freedom, independence, and opportunity. Pilgrims seeking liberty. Founding fathers building democracy. A young nation rising through courage and hard work. And while parts of that story are true, it isn't the full picture. Because history isn't just written by those who win. It's shaped by those who decide what gets remembered. Long before the United States existed, millions of people already lived on this land. They built societies with laws, trade networks, and cultures that thrived for centuries. But when expansion began, those civilizations weren't seen as nations. They were seen as obstacles. Treaties were signed, revised, and broken. Borders were redrawn. Entire communities were pushed aside and later reduced to footnotes. Much of this history was compressed into a few sentences, while its consequences lasted generations. As the colonies moved toward independence, the fight was described as a battle for freedom, and in many ways, it was. But behind the ideals were powerful interests. Merchants, landowners, and financiers who stood to gain from controlling land, trade, and resources. Independence promised liberty, but it also promised power. Some voices were elevated. Others were excluded from the conversation entirely. As the nation expanded, money became the engine of growth. Banks funded ambition. Railroads connected markets. Industry transformed cities. But progress came with a price. Workers labored long hours for little pay. Children entered factories. Entire towns depended on a single company to survive. This era built American power. Yet the human cost rarely made it into the narrative. Over time, the story of the nation became polished. Complicated chapters were simplified. Contradictions were softened. Not all history disappears by accident. School lessons are approved. Curriculum is edited. Stories that challenge national identity are often pushed aside in favor of unity. Because myths are easier to teach than uncomfortable truths. Throughout American history, those who challenged authority often paid a heavy price. Journalists who exposed corruption. Activists who demanded change. Workers who organized for rights. Some were silenced. Some were imprisoned. Some were only recognized long after they were gone. History moved forward, but not without leaving scars. And those scars didn't fade with time. Decisions made centuries ago shaped laws, neighborhoods, and institutions. Policies created advantages for some and lasting barriers for others. The past didn't disappear. It simply changed form. Understanding this history isn't about blaming the present for the mistakes of the past. It's about recognizing patterns. Because you can't fix what you refuse to see. Hidden history isn't about hating a country. It's about understanding it. A nation strong enough to face its past is stronger in its future. Truth doesn't weaken identity. It deepens it. And this story doesn't end here. What you've heard is only the surface of America's secret past. In the next story, we'll uncover a chapter so controversial it was nearly erased. Now, we move deeper into a chapter that shaped America in ways most people never learn. When we think about America's growth in the 19th century, we often picture progress, railroads, and westward expansion. But behind that image lies a story of forgotten treaties, stolen lands, and silenced voices. Native communities were systematically displaced. Agreements that were meant to protect their lands were rewritten or ignored. Families were uprooted. Generations lost. And these events weren't just local tragedies. They shaped the nation's entire foundation. Meanwhile, powerful interests in banking, industry, and government profited. Railroads expanded across lands taken from those who had lived there for centuries. Natural resources were claimed. Towns built. Cities thrived. Yet the people who had been here long before were mostly forgotten in the official story. Even newspapers of the time often downplayed or ignored these injustices. History books later condensed these events into a few lines, leaving out the human cost. And while many Americans celebrated expansion and opportunity, others questioned it quietly, often paying the price for speaking out. Labor movements began to rise, fighting unfair working conditions, long hours, and child labor. These struggles rarely make it into mainstream narratives, but they shape the labor laws and protections we have today. This chapter shows us that progress is never simple. It is layered with conflict, compromise, and consequence. Understanding these hidden truths helps us see why today's America looks the way it does. Next, we'll explore how powerful figures influence politics and culture, creating narratives that have lasted generations, stories you were never meant to question. And yet they shaped the very identity of the nation. Much of America's past was carefully curated. Now, we uncover how powerful figures influence politics, culture, and the stories we've been told for generations. Elite families, politicians, and industrialists didn't just shape policies, they shaped narratives. They decided which events would be celebrated and which would be buried. History became a tool, not just a record. Consider the newspapers, pamphlets, and textbooks of the time. They highlighted victories, patriotic tales, and national pride. But inconvenient truths, treaties broken, communities erased, voices silenced, were minimized or omitted entirely. Even cultural symbols were chosen to reinforce the preferred story. Monuments, national holidays, and official histories all told a version of America that emphasized triumph over complexity. Meanwhile, grassroots movements and dissenters continued to fight for recognition. Women, minorities, and labor activists challenged the status quo, often facing ridicule, imprisonment, or erasure. Yet, their struggles laid the foundation for many rights we take for granted today. This is the real power of history. It is not just about the past. It shapes how we see ourselves now. It influences law, policy, identity, and even what we teach the next generation. So when you look back, the stories you weren't taught reveal more than the stories you were. They expose ambition, corruption, courage, and resilience, all woven together in the fabric of a nation. Understanding these hidden histories doesn't diminish America, it strengthens it. It gives us perspective. It inspires questions. It challenges assumptions. And now, the lesson is clear. History is never neutral. It is curated, contested, and often rewritten. The past you were taught is only part of the picture, and the truths you uncover can change how you see the present. So, what will you do with the history you weren't taught? Think about it. Question it. Discuss it. Because the deeper the story, the more you understand America's secret past. Comment below with the part that surprised you most. Subscribe to Curious History Files for more stories history tried to forget. Because the truth is always more interesting than the myth.